Kim Davis is the Senior Vice President of the National Hockey League, so let's welcome her. Dr. Mark Clifford, close friend, and the Director of Dream Program at Position Sports. And Brad Perry, professional hockey skills coach, and a little bit of entrepreneur that I know about now. So we got to talk after this, which is good. So let's welcome him. So I'll go through, a few questions that I had. Again, this is just a roadmap for me because we have a lot of information just to be told to you guys. What I'll do, I'll leave a little bit of time at the end for some questions, and then we'll do a nice networking event right after. So first, let's get to know our panelists. So let's start with our Senior Vice President of National Hockey League, Kim Davis. Tell us, your objective and, when you started, and just give us a little bit of your background with the league.
Good morning. After walking across the major highway from the Cardinal Stadium, I needed a little coffee to get the morning started, so I'm happy to be here. Kim Davis, Senior Executive Vice President of the National Hockey League. I've been with the league for 4 years. Prior to joining the league, I spent about 30 years in investment banking, financial services, and consulting. Most of that time I spent with J.P. Morgan in a variety of roles. And what brought me to the National Hockey League was I was working as a consultant for a firm called Teneo. And Teneo was doing a project for the National Hockey League, and I had an opportunity to meet the commissioner. And the league had just celebrated its centennial, its first 100 years. And Gary was already thinking about what the next 100 years needed to look like for the league. And he was imagining that as demographics were shifting across North America, that the league was going to have to become far more intentional about the issues of growth relative to underrepresented audiences particularly, but to just understand the demographics as relates to younger people, their attitudes about the brands that they want to be part of. And so that work led to he and I having some very deep conversations about what the league needed to do, and some arguments, frankly, about it. And what I appreciated was Gary's willingness to listen. And that really started the journey that we've been on for the past 4 years to make our sport stronger, safer, more welcoming for everyone that wants to consume it. And so I'm looking forward to having conversations over the next few minutes about how we're doing that and why this is important for the growth of our business and the growth of our game.
Thank you, Kim. Pioneer, I say, every time I think of you. But Dr. Mark Clifford, what's really interesting to me is your background in the military and then being a doctor of sport. So tell me a little about that.
I didn't want to follow Kim. Can we go to Brad? For me, yes, I have a 20-year military background, and for those in the room, my father was the 4th African-American general officer in the United States Air Force. And we had talked about this before, and I'm not knowing that, not understanding, not realizing that as an adult or as a child because it's just dad. But as you grow older and understand that there was things that had to be knocked down in order for somebody to progress like my father. And so as you kind of progress, and I had the opportunity to go through the military experience, had a great career, and been doing education for about 10 years or so, even while still active duty Air Force. Landed here in Phoenix, Arizona, worked at a school down the street. Some of you know what I'm talking about. I've got some former students in here. But it's about elevating and making sure students have an opportunity to get into this industry that we all love and enjoy because of the spirit of sport. And so being able to do that has been gratifying for me, but it's also just innate in me to help others gain access to things that they may not have access to. And so more recently, over the last year or so, I've been asked to help with a program called the Dream Program about helping students at HBCUs get into the sport industry. And that's now become a full-time job, because if you look across, there are over 400 sport management programs across the country. I don't know how many more than when I went through my program, but there's over 400. Out of the 101 HBCUs, there's 22 that have sport management programs. And a lot of those schools and universities are not in locations where there's professional sport. And so how do people of color, people with black and brown skin, get the opportunity to get into an industry where if you are at a school like Clark Atlanta, it's in Atlanta, Georgia, but you're fighting students from the state schools, University of Georgia, you may not have the opportunity to get in. And so now this is the opportunity for me, just like someone did for my father, to break down barriers for others so that others may be able to progress in an industry, and I'm excited about the growth.
That's great. We'll get into the Dream program, what you've been doing there, so in a little bit. Brad, California kid, please tell me a little about yourself.
Hello, everybody. How's it going? I am originally from Los Angeles, California. I grew up playing hockey there and then ended up leaving to go chase my dream of becoming a professional hockey player around North America. I ended up going to Windsor, Ontario, and from there I was coaching. That was my job. I was a professional coach since I was 15, basically. And I have been in and out of almost every building in the United States, hockey arena. And from that perspective, being able to observe how it works from the director standpoint, from the leadership standpoint, and understanding what that means and how players are able to kind of navigate through this. It's a really hard situation as you're growing up. So for me, I think I'm at a place, when I'm coaching, that I'm trying to help other players like me that have gone through some of these situations just understand how to navigate that. And that's basically what I've been doing my whole life now.
That's great. And what's interesting, these are perspectives of industry, education, and the actual sport. So my first question is to all of you. Let's just hit it in the head right now. Is what barriers from your perspectives that you see we still need to overcome in sport? Let's talk about specifically hockey, right? Kim, if you want to kind of start off from your perspective from a league level.
Well, when I think about the kind of change that we need across the sport, I approach it from a systems perspective. Like, how do we think about sort of every aspect of our system that needs to reimagine itself in the face of the changes that are occurring in our society, and the expectations that our fans and our fans in waiting, as Javier always says, have of our sport. And so for me, it starts with leadership. Both of you guys talked about the importance of leadership from the top. I often talk about courageous leadership, the kind of leadership that is intentional and willing to push boundaries. Leadership like Javier, and I'm not just saying that because he's here and he's a friend, but he has been intentional about ensuring that skill meets access and opportunity. I think the NHL Bound program is an example of that. It's great that we have a coaching program for coaches of color to help develop them, but those kinds of programs only work if people get practical experience in a club where they can build networks and get inside the network so that they can not just survive but thrive. And so that's an example of leadership. The next one I think about all the time and we work on is employment. We talk about representation mattering, but it matters if you see yourself. And everybody is comfortable when they can see themselves. And when you are a person of color, that's something that you just don't have the opportunity to take for granted. I think about when I started my career back in the early 80s, there was nobody in the finance management program that looked like me. There were only 2 women. They were white women. There were no people of color. And over the course of the 30 years that I've been in industry, in most of the places I've been the only one. So representation counts. And so we have to create an environment where people see themselves to want to be part of our sport. So these are the systems changes that we need to happen. Youth participation, all of these are areas we have to work on. And while it sometimes appears daunting, this is the change that we seek so that we have long-term viability in our sport.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that because I agree from the educational standpoint, and I see it with students all the time. 80% of our students that come into a sport management program, you ask them day one, what do you think you're going to be? They're all going to be GM of the Yankees. I'm like, all right, good luck with that. There's one of those in the world, good luck. But it comes down to representation. The students don't see, and I've had a young black student at my former job, can I just say, GCU, I was at GCU, hey, lopes up, at GCU, who loved hockey, who was interested in hockey, wanted to work in hockey, and this organization has been open doors to every student at GCU, but he didn't feel comfortable when he got here because he was one of very few. And it was before Phil and Anthony and others had showed up that looked like him, and so the comfort level just wasn't there. And we had conversations about what that really means. And again, I push and I push and I push. It's all about gaining that experience no matter where you are, because then you'll be able to land in that job, that dream job when it comes up. But again, it's difficult. We have to be empathetic when we see people that don't look like us that are in a different area, different space. Because if we don't take the time to do that and understand that that person may have some challenges, then how do we reach out and understand how to help and develop and push and make sure that they're successful in an organization they want to be successful in? I didn't start off with this, but I grew up playing hockey. I was in Michigan when my dad retired. I loved hockey. I was on an all-star team that went to Canada. Like, I played that was fun. I enjoyed it. But I got in fights because people would call me names. And it was easier for me to go pick up a basketball and play because my friends played basketball than continue down a road where I didn't feel comfortable. And I think if we get into a space that is not comfortable for everybody, then we have to challenge that. And we have to be thought leaders, and we have to be courageous to challenge that, to make sure that there's change, and people of all races and color can have these types of barriers broken down so they can be successful in a sport that doesn't look like them now, but will in the future. So,
I also, having been in the facilities, I run into a situation where the gatekeepers, the people that are controlling the access to that ice, is a big problem. A lot of the time, the people that are in those positions, they have it locked up where we don't have access. It doesn't matter if you're black or whatever. You don't have access to the ice because they're good. They already have the people that they need, or they already have a program in place. So there is no room to bring in outside help, people that could be diverse, that could help our situation by saying, hey, there's another coach that's of color. That's awesome. Let me go talk to that person because I can relate to that person. We don't have that because the people that are in control a lot of the time prevent new instructors and people coming into the programs. That's something that we also have to address. How do you fight a system that's set up where the people that are preventing us from getting out there, how do we show them that there is a benefit when they're like, no, I'm good, we're good, we don't need to worry about that, it's no problem. So that's something that I would like to address with this group as well, is just, how do we get past that?
And I think we have to fight this. I will say in my military experience, yes, there was African Americans that were in the general ranks. Yes, there were African Americans that were senior level. I got to a point where I was a senior officer too, and I could hire or move people up into position to help them with their career. And I would seek out young black or brown or other races to move up, because the majority of the Air Force, at least the higher echelon, is white. And so what you fight, though, is now that I bring up a young person of color is, oh, there he goes taking care of his own, right? Because that's the mentality. And my feedback to them always was, because I'm the person that speaks my mind, is, but you've been doing that for 70-something years as soon as the Air Force has been created. Why is it now a problem when I'm trying to elevate somebody? And I think that's another thing that's a challenge for people of color when they're the minority in an organization, is that it's seen as, oh, you're only elevating because you need more. And that's just not the case. It's elevating the right people so that we all have an opportunity to be successful.
And these are the uncomfortable conversations that we have to have in mixed audiences like this, where as white allies, you have to understand that excellence should know no color, gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, that we are seeking top talent. And if, because of your lived experience, you haven't had experience with people that intersect at those differences, suspend judgment and be open to change. And if somebody doesn't work out in an organization, don't paint with a broad brush and assume that that performance represents the entire group. Or as a person of color, as these guys have said, be afraid to hire someone that looks like you because for some reason, if things don't work out, you're going to be painted with saying that you hired someone that was not qualified. Right? These are the unspoken flashcards that are set up for groups that we all have to work on dismantling, right? And those of us that are in positions of power have to have the courage to lead that dismantling of those flashcards that society has set up around certain groups. And I think it's these kinds of conversations that help us to dismantle those flashcards.
Absolutely. And, this brings up another really good thought, right? The myths of and perspectives that Black people face, right? And for me, it's not the outside. It's my cousin, in Chicago, like, what are you doing, working in hockey? Or my good friends, like, that's a white person in sport. What are you doing? So from that perspective, like, what are some myths, Black people face in the game of hockey today that's just not true? Kim, I think you talked about some of the history. I think that's really important for this group to understand, how Black people actually, helped create the game, which is really important.
When I joined the NHL, literally a week after I joined, I got a call from this guy, Kwame Mason, who now you guys know. He actually did the filming and was executive producer of NHL Bound. But he also did the first documentary about the history of Blacks in the sport called Soul on Ice. If you haven't seen it, please take a peek at it. It's on Peacock. And he sent me this book called Black Ice, The History of Blacks in the Sport of Hockey. And it was stunning for me to read that book and to learn that Blacks had been involved in hockey going back to the late 1800s. 1895, the Colored Hockey League was formed. It was made up of free slaves that had migrated primarily from the Carolinas up to Nova Scotia, and through the church, which is very typical in the Black community, that the church ends up being the centerpiece of leadership in many ways. These leagues were formed, and it was before the National Hockey League. And those leagues went on until the 1930s. And so reading that book was empowering for me because it let me know that hockey was not something that was foreign for communities of color. There was a history. And every time I have an opportunity to talk about that, I do.
And Brad, I think it would be good to talk about your experiences as a player.
So for me, I was fortunate enough to, being from Los Angeles, everybody acts out there. So I was fortunate enough to be in a couple movies, Mighty Ducks 2, Mighty Ducks 3, and in those movies, a lot of, to this day, I still have a lot of people that'll come up to me and say, I started playing this game because of those movies. And in those movies, there were 2 Black players, 2 women, there was an Asian player, 2 Hispanic players. So these are people that are introduced to this sport with that lens, right? So what that tells me is that the way that we can kind of fight the stereotype or these myths is that by showing scenarios where people are on video, they're influencers. There's a person, his name's Chris Kubai, I think is his name, from Hockey Tutorials. And he's an African-born British national. And He puts out great videos, and he talks about all the stuff that he goes through. But again, if you want to learn, so for me as a coach, I have had players that have never been in contact with a black hockey player or a coach. Parents come up to me and they say, "Thank you for being a great role model. We really appreciate this." They've never experienced that. So that kid, when the time comes, they may not say something bad, to a black player or a Hispanic player. But it's those types of things. I think for me, that was very powerful, seeing that a movie like 30 years ago still has an effect on people. And I think that's going to kind of be the way that we're going to have to attack this. I don't think we can tell people that they have to, do this, or they have to, we have to give them what it is that they want. For me, that's how to be a better hockey player. I can teach you how to do that. And by doing that, people are like, I don't care what color this guy is, he just made me better. So let's go with that guy, And I think that's kind of the way that we have to kind of continue this with social media, influencers, and things like that. So.
Yes, you want to talk about Miz? Well, I agree with both, and I think we had a great conversation, what was it, Tuesday, about this same subject, and I think the next follow-on then is, yes, if we have representation, we can find a coach or we have that role model, then the next barrier is access, because where are our ice rinks? Right here in Arizona, they're in the affluent neighborhoods. Are we brave enough to plop a majority of the African Americans, for example, in the city of Phoenix is in South Phoenix? Are we brave enough to plop an ice rink in South Phoenix to open the door to people to learn how to play hockey? That's challenging, because there's a lot of different things that come along with that, with funding, access, equipment. It's an expensive sport. I was lucky, he was lucky to have access to those things because of resources. Stories are a little bit different. Mine was my parents, and yours was at an ice rink that was funded, correct, in LA, to give you access to play the sport. But if you don't have that, then how do we at least grow players that may be interested in the sport, don't know about the sport? And I think that's probably the next challenge, is how do we then have athletes who are interested but don't go to the basketball court because it's easy for me to pick up a ball and play with friends that look like me, but continue to grind out because I enjoyed the sport and I wanted to be a better ice skater and I wanted to be a better hockey player, but yet, the comfort level wasn't there because I wasn't surrounded by those that looked like me. And I think that's another challenge that somehow we've got to get past and provide resources to those who want to play the sport, who want to get into the sport, because they're going to make it better in the long run.
Yeah, I think No, I know.
No, that.
You kind of, led to the other question, but you guys are answering it. Is representation matters, and that's a really important factor, especially with young black kids, right? And feeling comfortable with themselves to take a chance, right? The next question is kind of now we kind of figured out what the issues are. Where do you see the game of hockey going? And then where do you see kind of the business of hockey going? I think, Kim, you could probably lead off this conversation because it is ascending from a multicultural perspective.
Well, I think the game and the business, you have to talk about them together. And part of that has to do with how we continue to make our sport culturally available to new audiences and communities. And as much as we talk about barriers to access being around ice, infrastructure, costs, and those are absolutely real. One of the things that we learned when I was a consultant before I joined the league and was working with the league was that as much as those are barriers, what's also a tremendous barrier is that it's not culturally available to many communities. In other words, they don't see themselves, their music, their food, their culture in the sport. And often when we say that, people in hockey who love the sport, and the sport is very tribal, and I think that's one of the enduring characteristics about the sport of hockey, is that when you are part of the tribe of hockey, man, you feel good. You're in it, you're inside the bubble. You know, all of the life lessons and the skills that come with hockey are enduring. But somehow or another, when you're on the outside of that, you feel like you're peering in and you're trying to figure out how to get in. And that's what we talk about when we say culturally available. It means going into communities and exposing communities to the sport and not expecting, because we say our doors are open for business, that people are going to come to us. It means identifying coaches that look like those communities where kids can relate and they are in those communities, and we're building trust with those communities. It means providing pathways and access at every level. That means street hockey, exposing communities through street hockey. We just launched and are piloting a new street product at the NHL level so that we can combine food and entertainment and music and culture with a street format where you have clothing and swag and everything that makes kids feel like this sport is for them. We piloted it at All-Star, and we did a tournament over 2 days. It was amazing. We're going to pilot it again at Stadium Series next week. But the idea here is that at every level, we need to be identifying influencers. We need to be identifying the ways in which we can make people feel like they're part of the tribe. And again, it's a journey. It's not an event. It's a movement, not a moment. It's not something that's going to happen over time. We're going to make mistakes. And when we make missteps, we can't say, oh my God, we failed, so let's stop trying. Fail fast, adjust fast. That's the business part of it. In business, when you fail, in business, if you don't fail, something's wrong, right? And so we have to have the same attitude as we are looking to grow the game.
I shared this when we had a conversation the other day. In class, I had a couple of folks from NASCAR, and they were looking for ideas from students on how they can open the door for more diverse fans to come to a race. And so the students came up with food trucks, music, all these different ideas. And I remember the young lady said, well, 85% of our fan base looks like the stereotype that they think they look like. So we're not going to turn them off because that's our money train. And in my mind, I was like, you have to take a chance to change that. With all the things that you've just outlined, it's a matter of you may lose some of that 85% of that fan base because they're not willing to understand why we're making the change or why we're putting different outlets out there for other fans to be part of the sport. But you may gain 50% of another race or another ethnic group that will become fans of hockey that balance out or even outgrow that. And I think from a business standpoint, it's taking the risk, but why are we taking the risk? And I think for the long run, it's because business will be better when everyone enjoys the business and can enjoy the sport. And not, are you going to make some people upset? I think of the Super Bowl halftime show, and you see all the feeds and Twitter, oh, Lord have mercy. Oh, yeah, well, this is just for a certain group. Every halftime show's for a certain group. It is what it is. But if you enjoy it, you're going to watch it. But I guarantee you're going to watch it again next year to see who's the halftime again next year, right? Whether it fit who you are today or not, some people go back. Either way, you may lose some people, yeah, but in the long run, I think you're going to gain a whole lot more in terms of those who become fans, love, enjoy the sport, and want to be around that and want to be in that bubble because it's fun, it represents them. Not always. I come to hockey games and I understand, like, when Lamont Buford was here, I used to text him, hey, man, put some Michael Jackson on or something, you know? Like, play some music, man, so I can. But you know what I'm saying? But it's just a matter of, I'm going to come either way. They're going to play music that I don't listen to, but I'm still here, and I love it.
From my point of view, as an amateur instructor, I run into a situation where the people that are running the business don't know business. They don't treat the people like customers. The hockey players that come in, the families that come in through the building, they don't treat them like customers, and they don't try to help them in that way. A lot of the time, these are people that are hockey players or figure skaters. They've been doing it their whole life, and they just kind of fall into this position, and now they're running this the best way that they can. They don't have an apprenticeship. They don't learn from other people. The previous director, usually they force that director out. And there's tension, there's conflict. So there's not a lot of this kind of training you to be better for all of us. It's me and mine and what I can get. And that is the way it is everywhere in hockey. We once we figure that out and we figure out how to talk to those people in that way, we may have a little bit more success. But until we deal with that, how do we convince these people that they're making their money, enough money for them, they're good, they're happy? Why do I want to add more stress, more pressure, more anything for what they see as a charity event? You know, they tend to focus on their, I'm trying not to be negative here, but they tend to focus on the top 1%. What is that? That's the travel teams. Those are the elite players that have the money to fund them. So when you see that, they're really, I mean, there's only so many hours in the day that they can give access to ice time. Who pays for that? When you buy a rink, most of the time it's a losing venture. So they need to keep the doors open, and that's the best way that they know how to. And so for me, figuring out how to create a place where you can have people say, all right, this is a good cause, but there's also something in it for all of us, which is, it's sad, but that's just the way it is. These are people that don't know business, that are doing the best they can in some cases, but we have to educate them. We have to show them what the benefit is, and that is going to take some time, but it's real. That's a real problem.
And this is such an important conversation to have, because I think over the 4 years that I've been here, and I have spent time in all of the minor hockey organizations and the professional leagues, the ECHL, the AHL, all the youth governing bodies, a lot of time there. And it has finally occurred to us that the change that we are trying to effectuate across the sport of hockey can't happen if the NHL doesn't take demonstrative leadership in leading that effort. And as much as we may not have a legal responsibility to do that, it impacts our business and our brand anytime an incident happens anywhere in the hockey ecosystem, whether it's a homophobic slur, whether it is lack of competence in terms of knowing how to train and develop, whether it's a racial slur. All of these things ultimately have an impact on our brand. And so we just announced back in December and got approved by the Board of Governors this initiative called Respect Hockey, which has 4 dimensions to it, and it starts with training. And we are going to take leadership in training every single person that works in the hockey ecosystem, from the NHL all the way down to youth hockey and parents. It's a massive undertaking. Last week we had a meeting with all of the non-NHL bodies, so the CHL, the AHL, all of those organizations, and are helping them build the competencies because they don't have business acumen. As you said, many folks that are running, even as commissioners of those organizations, grew up in hockey, they grew up playing, they've never had a course in running business or finance or marketing. And so it's going to be a heavy lift, but there is no way that our sport is going to adjust and advance if we don't take a leadership stance as the NHL in doing this, and Gary is prepared to do that now.
Great. You know, music and sports is definitely synced up. When I walk past the locker room, I'm like, man, they listen to Meek Mill? Like, they didn't know who that is. Like, what? So Chadwick has done a great job this year of incorporating some hip-hop in hockey. So now my next question would be a little bit more intentional for each of you. And Kim, you know, the conversation we had yesterday, or Tuesday, sorry, was you talked about the 7 dimensions of inclusion. Can you kind of follow up with that? And this is a really, you know, good thought of yours, and I think it's really important for our staff and others to, you know, get that from you.
So 2 years ago, we developed a framework called the 7 Dimensions of Excellence in Inclusive Leadership. And the framework is intended to help our entire system, every club, the league, really every part of the ecosystem, to begin to unpack and to understand all the cylinders that have to be rowing in the same direction in order for us to really grow our sport. So I talked a little bit earlier about sort of the first of those 7, starting with leadership. The second is education. You know, you do better when you know better. And so we have to hold ourselves accountable to making sure that we have a baseline understanding across the entire league of what bad behaviors are: bullying, abuse, harassment, discrimination. Understand all forms of abuse and discrimination, and that is an effort that is underway. The third dimension is employment. Again, representation counts. You see it, you believe you can be it. The fourth dimension is marketing. There's a difference between multicultural marketing and diversity and inclusion. Yes, they're cousins, but they're different. The discipline of multicultural marketing has diversity and inclusion elements to it, but it is a discipline. It's a discipline just like technology or finance, and so we have to make sure that we have the competency to build that. Youth participation, making sure that we're going in communities and starting programs and creating all the pathways. Community and civic engagement, and partnerships. So those are the 7 dimensions. And as I talk to leaders in the clubs, we talk about how do you interpret those 7 dimensions in a way that you create a long-term strategic plan where every part of your organization is talking. One observation I had when I joined hockey was that departments are very siloed. And so the community relations people don't talk to the marketing people, don't talk to the ticketing people, don't talk to the finance people. And in order for you to create a holistic business plan, every part of the organization has to be talking and in sync with how the work that they do relates and to every other part of the organization. So that's the model that we've put in place.
That's great. That's great. And Mark, can you just elaborate a little bit more about the DREAM program and something special you want to announce with the Arizona Coyotes?
Are you gonna let me say it?
Yeah, I'm going to let you say it.
You're right. Well, yes, the DREAM program. So Position Sports is a sport marketing agency here in town. 2 years ago during the pandemic and George Floyd's murder, they started a mentorship program for students at HBCUs. And one of the employees, her dad's Jim Caldwell, she was really invested in making sure that she was able to pay it forward. And so over the course of last year, they reached out to me to help them build out an educational platform that complemented their 10-week mentorship program. And they've got clients from Nike to Jordan to different leagues across, Basketball Hall of Fame. And so a lot of those folks would come in and guest speak to these young kids about how to get your foot in the door in sports, what does event operations really look like and feel like. And so adding the educational piece to that, and then last year what we did is we kicked off live event partners. And so we had a handful of college football games as our partners, and really what it boils down to, as a lot of the young people in this room know, all of us really know, it's sometimes who you know. And if you don't have access to people that are in the know, that can open doors, back to the gatekeepers that don't allow you in, it's really tough to get a job in sport. Again, 400 and something sport management programs across the country, 20 of them are from historically black colleges and universities. It's tough. It is a tough industry to get in because there's thousands of young people lined up for that one particular job. And so giving the students the access and the mentorship and that guidance, we're really pushing hard to have these young students from HBCUs who are black and brown to try to get into this industry of sport. And a lot of them gravitate toward football and basketball because that's what they know. So this year, we're kicking off, this is the first time we're running it over the spring semester. It is a nonprofit now. And then we are working with the Coyotes, thanks to Nadia, Javier, Anthony, and Tanya, I see you, and the rest of the team, because they're going to become a partner. And what that means is that our students are going to work on a project for the Coyotes over the course of this 10-week program, and we're going to fly some of the students out to meet the people here here in Arizona. And while they're here, because we're such a great city for sport, we're going to get them out to network with folks from different areas as well, because it is about the access and gaining that camaraderie and that network of people that's going to help you along your way in your career. And so that's the program of DREAM is to get these students. I'll tell you, the first year that they did it, they had 22 students from 5 different historically black colleges and universities. Last year when we jumped in, it was now, I think, 30 students from 11 HBCUs. We opened the registration. There's 56 kids from 22 different HBCUs that have applied to our program because they want to get the access. They want to get in, and they want to know what it's like. And I know, Javier, I've got you scheduled for next week to talk to the students. You probably don't know that yet, but I got you scheduled. We'll just make the announcement here. I'll get on your account. No, I'm just kidding. But right, it's introducing these students to hockey because I want them to know and understand what the sport that I grew up with and I love, and know that it's just another opportunity to get experience, but it can be a great career if they choose to. So happy to announce it, and thank you to the Coyotes for being partners with us.
Yeah.
Can I add something real quick? You know, we were talking on Tuesday, and one of the things that I was thinking is that USA Hockey puts on this ADM, it's the American Development Model, and it's in every rink. And most of the time, a lot of parents will come out, volunteer people will come out, and they can't skate most of the time. There's 5 or 6 of these people that are out there, they can't skate, but they're offering their help. That could potentially be a good vehicle to get more people of color involved. I mean, there are already these people that are out there. The program's already set in every facility in the country. And they already have coaches that have never skated before. They are just putting their skates on for the first time. So there are ways, I know for when I run hockey schools, I have counselors and coaches will come out that are in high school and in college. They receive community service points for their work with me. Something like that, where they come out, it's kind of twofold. They now are introduced to this sport that they never played before. They also get credit, and they're also helping kids, plus they're also there representing a diverse community, which that's something that we might want to talk about later on. Just wanted to bring that up.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah.
Brad, I got one last question for you. What can we do, on a youth level to just increase the participation, specifically of, people of color in hockey? From your perspective, I know you mentioned a few things, but just kind of wrapping it up on your side, what can we do today?
Yeah, I really think that if we try to place people in the locations, it's really tough to try to find qualified individuals that can go into these rinks, that will be allowed to go into these rinks, that can coach and make a difference. There's just not enough of us out there to do something like that. So again, where do you get out there? Where do you put out your message? Social media, influencers. I mean, really, I've gone through this for my whole life, trying to figure out how to make this work. My parents ran a hockey organization out of Van Nuys, California, and we received funding from the American Athletic Foundation. The program was incredible for 5 years. Funding ran out, and 97% of our players were gone. So that's a huge issue. The cost of equipment, for me, it's just impossible. I was telling these guys on the call that I have players now that have money that don't want to take slap shots because they don't want to break their stick because it costs too much to get another one. Now, you tell that to my mom, who was a single mom of 3 kids in Los Angeles, that she's got to shell out another $300. That's just for the equipment. To get to the place and then the travel and all the other stuff, it's how do we make that more affordable? So for me, you have to address, you look at European hockey, they wear sponsorship all over their body, okay? That is an avenue that we don't take here in the United States, in North America, but we need to be able to get more people, diverse people involved. We need to have something like that happening because it's just too expensive. The other thing that we talked about was going, and I know if there's any hockey shop owners here, they're going to hate me for this, but we have to start going directly to China for the supplies. If you go through a hockey company here, it's still going to be expensive. And if you buy a hockey stick for $300 and you're able to get that hockey stick for 20 in China going directly to them, that may create a little bit more inclusion for people that could not afford the sport, And then so for me, I think that's probably our best strategy: social media, influencers, showing that there are people like Chris Kubui, I think his name is, Kubui, right? People like that, like him, like me. I think that's going to be a very important step to all of this. And then also with the National Hockey League, you guys are the beacon, and it would be great if there was a place on the National Hockey League site where you could go to learn how to be a better hockey player, with, Anson Carter giving point. I'm sure there's something like that, but those types of things where people are like, and then, the special cool tricks and things like that get people kind of watching through, like the TikTok stuff, but those, you know what I'm talking about, Instagram. Yeah, there you go. But things like that. I mean, there are a whole bunch of things that we have to do, but we're able to do more of rather than trying to force people into those locations. It's going to be very difficult to do that. So.
Great. We're heading towards the end of the program here. I want to leave 5 to 10 minutes for any questions that you have for our panel. Miles?
You guys talked about accessibility, and I think, I don't want to say missed, but one thing I think is important that more NHL games are going to be on television, so having rights like ESPN and TNT. How do you think more people being able to watch the sport on television is going to make them translate to actually playing?
Hey, you
hear them
you
up
made
here.
Kim
That's you,
think.
Kim.
That's a good question.
That's you, Kim.
Yeah, that was your question.
I'm not sure more linear exposure is actually going to be the answer for, particularly for younger audiences. I think we know that the way they are consuming the sport is very different and will continue to be very different. And they may not sit and look at a full game. They may, peek into the game on their mobile device. They may go to places where they're hanging out and have some way that they consume the game digitally. So I think we have to be thinking across all of the various outlets and the ways in which change our perspective on the way people are going to consume the game and not have sort of a one-size-fits-all model around consumption. I think we're seeing a lot of that change. I think we are experiencing that through a lot of the work that Heidi Browning, who came to us from Pandora and is our CMO now, and the way she's exposing the league and the sport to how we need to think about this younger demographic. But I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all, and I'm not sure linear is going to be the answer of the future. Kim's perspective, not the NHL's perspective.
Anyone else? Lindsay?
Hi, everyone.
I was looking for you.
You're looking for here. I'll stand up. Esteemed better. Yeah. So obviously, all three of you know what we do on the girls' side here, but what's been really interesting, and I'm starting to realize it now, is we're now going to be in all four of the local house rinks with a Chimen's program, one team in each of the levels. And I think the way the conversation
one of the biggest issues with that for me is that, unfortunately, black people in hockey are targets by hateful people. It's just the way it is. I went through it my whole career. And when you put together a team of players that are ethnic, you do need to be aware of that. The anger, the aggression that you'll feel from people that resent that. With girls, it's a little bit different because there's not a lot of hitting. Boys are just mean people in general. When I was growing up, we used to play Native American teams, full teams of Native Americans, and they were the teams on the res. And those were really, really tough games, really tough teams to play. They were able to fight their way out of it, but it was a fight. And that's something that you have to watch out from this standpoint. I've thought about this a lot. It would be great to get a whole group of players of one color or just ethnic players on one team. But then you have to look at it from the danger side of it. How do we protect those players? It's great. I'm having a conversation right now. This is probably the first time that I've ever been in a conversation with 4 people about hockey in my entire life. Think about that. Like, I've never had this conversation with 4 people in the same room of color. So that's something that we have to address. But from your point of view, that's going to be very hard. Plus, you finding those players, then educating those players. You may have one coach that is capable, but then at the next facility, they don't. And there's a lot of pushback. So that you do. I mean, it's possible. But there are, for me, every time there's a solution, I'm constantly thinking of, okay, what happens when they run into this? Because it's going to happen. So it's possible. But hopefully through years of doing what we're doing, it just organically grows into more players of color on the team. Right? I was on the ice the other day, and I had 3 black kids, a Jewish kid, a Hispanic kid, and an Asian kid. And they were all on the ice at the same time when I was coaching that. To me, I looked at that and I was like, this is amazing. This is incredible where we've come, because that never would have happened before. So I think it could grow organically into that at some point. But we got to start somewhere.
I also think we want to create an environment where however kids want to play and wherever and with whom they want to play, they feel safe and welcomed in doing that. There are going to be situations where, kids of color are playing on teams where they're the only ones, and we want them to feel affirmed in themselves. That's really the goal. Yes, there are going to be times when they're going to be all girl, all gay, all black or brown teams, and that's affirming as well, but affirmation comes in a lot of different forms. And for me, it's creating an environment where however kids play, whoever they play, and wherever they play, they can feel safe and welcomed. And that's the core of it. And to know that there are networks across the country so that they can see kids like themselves playing in all those different situations. There's a girls of color team in Minnesota, the Hockey Niñas, that are all girls of color, and they're coached by women of color. That's affirming for the little girl in Rockford, Illinois, who's playing as the only black girl on an all-boys team, right? And she's absolutely comfortable playing on that team. But for her to know about the Hockey Niñas is affirming for her. So in my perfect world, I would love for that to be our goal, as opposed to trying to create any kind of artificial situations around any particular group.
I think Nadia. Go ahead, Nick. I'll get you next.
I always like to start from a standpoint of good intentions, and I would venture to say that the vast majority of those gatekeepers that you talk about, Brad, don't consider themselves biased, and many don't believe that the systems are biased, not only in sports but just our American institutions. And all of a sudden, we're asking them to go through this very deep self-reflection, right? And that's not a free process for anyone. I don't care who you are. But we're starting to see these walls come up because these well-intentioned
Well, you can't figure it out, but you can't figure it out by yourself if you put walls up, right? And I think sport, hockey, it's a microcosm of society, and we bring ourselves into our workplace. And so we have to create an environment where people can feel comfortable at whatever level of comfort they choose to engage. And our responsibility, I believe, is for us to create an environment where people can begin to have the uncomfortable conversation, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. That's the work that each of us has to do. We often, we want to think about bias or racism or any of the isms in these two dimensions. Either I am racist or I'm not racist. Either I'm homophobic or I'm not homophobic. And that's not how the world works. It's the gray area that trips us up. And we all have gray area, and we all have biases. Just because I'm a black woman doesn't mean that I'm exempt from my own set of biases, and that I should be held accountable to those that learning myself. I need to be continuously learning about the ways in which I show up. And so each of us has to make that decision that I want to be better, right? And I can only be better if I'm willing to interrogate my models, to interrogate how I grew up, and maybe there's some things that I learned that I have to unlearn. And that's the decision each of us has to make. We can't make anybody make that decision, but what we can do is to create an environment where we're talking about it. And so if you're ready to engage, there's a willingness where we can suspend judgment and have that conversation. And I think that's the journey that we're on, and that's the work that each of us has to do.
I also think that you could technically just take it out of their hands. Like I said, the ADM program exists. That's something that's already there. If a director has an issue, a gatekeeper has an issue with something, well, if there's already a program that's in place that we can use as a platform for this, then that automatically gets rid of their involvement. So we don't have to worry about that. So that may be a potential avenue just to take it away from them, you know, because they're not gonna give it up willingly. They're not gonna allow you to take their space because they've already got it set up for their own program and their own monetary gain. So what do you do next? Take it away from them. You know, if USA Hockey comes in or the National Hockey League comes in, the rink is gonna sell them the ice. So there's the ice, you put your program in place, that could get past it. That's just massive.
And to complement what Kim was talking about, I also think that people build barriers and put up walls because they're comfortable behind it. Because that's, and I'm not willing to self-reflect. And I think the one thing that I did take from the military is that every 3 to 6 months you're having your feedback session with and you're forced to do self-reflection. And I took that seriously to really take a step back and internalize who I am and who I wanted to be. And not that you judge your character, but we're now in a part of our society where these conversations have to happen because there are some, whether you want to believe it or not, systemic things that have been put in place that have built barriers for other people. And if we're not willing to have these courageous conversations that are uncomfortable, then we'll continue to be in a place where we never progress. And I think if we're all willing to progress and we're at least all willing to have at least that self-reflection and those tough conversations and be told about yourself. And you don't have to, you know, it's, again, you're going to believe what you want to believe and you're going to, turn yourself into who you want to be. But I think at least having these conversations at least opens the doors to us to progress as a team, as an organization, as a society. I've got really lofty there, I'm sorry. But in order to move forward and be an inclusive society that we want to have. And I think that's kind of, and then being able to empathize. I think that's one of the main things that, you know, we talk about bias and stereotypes. We've got to be able to put ourselves in other people's shoes to kind of understand their walk. And if you understand their walk a little bit, then it makes it a little bit easier to have a conversation, open conversation about progression.
Right. Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, flipping,
No, go ahead, Val.
flipping it kind of from the access on the player and coaching side of things to the offer some of the job opportunities. How you convert that into legitimate interest where it's not just, well, the NHL is the only person offering you a job, you'll take it. But if you're saying an NHL job comparatively to an NBA, NFL, MLB job, the NHL job then becomes higher up on that priority list. Because I think there are people that are still interested in learning that general business skill set and acumen, but they still don't necessarily want to translate it as hockey being their first choice, especially if you're African American or if you're coming from the HBC background. That's one of the main questions I've been getting in my sessions, actually.
I'll tell you from at least the young black students that I've interacted with is this, they just, A, they don't understand the sport because they have not been exposed to the sport. And B, it's reflection. They don't see a lot of people of color in that organization. So although it's interesting to them and although it's a foot in the door, it's I'm going to basketball, I'm going to NBA or NFL if I can get there because it's people look like me, I'm going to feel more comfortable. So I think it's about, again, understanding that that's probably their viewpoint where they're coming in from, right? I would ask those kids that you're having from HBCU, how many of you have ever learned the game of hockey? If they don't understand what icing is and why you're going the other side, if they don't understand the sport, basketball they understand, football they understand, soccer they understand, baseball, it's easy for them to pick up that sport. But if you don't know this game of hockey, it's difficult to watch sometimes. And so I would ask them that, you know, are you familiar with the sport? And then if they're comfortable with it and they see more of themselves in that organization, and you're making the organization uncomfortable, right? I don't believe there's any hockey team that's out there that if somebody, if Phil, you went somewhere else, that they're not going to welcome you. I think every organization's welcoming, but then it's then how do they build that community? How do they build, you know, that this is my place? Like that's what we want our young employees to feel is they're all in.
We have to change our mindset in hockey to understand that we have to make our brand interesting for other audiences, those that have not either ever played or consumed the sport. This is about us looking inward and saying, just because we have 100 jobs open doesn't mean that our brand is going to be interesting enough for those people to want to come here. It's an all-out assault that we have to take. We have to start going to different schools. We have to start going to conferences and exposing folks to our brand. We have to partner with organizations like SEO, a program that Javier came through and he's being honored this year, one of the largest programs to attract top talent of color, and they've been doing it for 40 years, Javier. And we have to create tracks in these places where top talent exists to make our brand interesting and accessible. It is as important as building youth participation. Building our brand with these audiences is equally important, and it requires a strategy. It's not a one-off where I got a job opening in, you know, Nashville, and therefore I can't find any. I have this conversation every single day with people that sit around the executive table who have job openings, and they are wondering why they aren't getting any people of color applying for those jobs. And my answer is, what is it that's attractive about your brand, your leadership, that makes them want to come and work for you, right? The fact of the matter is, since I joined the league, I have people calling constantly, not because I'm so great, but because they see somebody that looks like themselves. They see the way I market the NHL on all of my social channels, and they want to come and see and be part of that, even if they don't know anything about hockey, because they see the brand differently. We've got to make the brand different.
And Phil, you're doing a great job, right? Like, they feel that you are invested in them, and that is the first step. That's the number one step, is you're taking time out of your day at the end of the day to spend time with them one-on-one, to teach them sales processes. They're never going to forget that. So you're already making that pathway for long-term growth for them. Now, what happens with the young individual is
they're pressured by their peers, right? So they go to HBCU and they say, I'm going to join a hockey team. What? Hockey? So that is one thing that I'm being dead serious. I know these kids. They're going to go back and say, man, Phil offered me a job. What? Hockey? No, I'm going to NBA, man. Like, blah, blah. So a lot of that's going to be long term, and those are things that you have to fight. But just to say, like, you're doing the right thing. And to see that representation from you and spending that time, I would guarantee no other team right now is doing what you're doing to represent the Coyotes and also the NHL. So great job on that. Let's give it a Phil real quick on that. Phil's Academy.
Absolutely.
All right, DJ, what we got? You got nothing? All right. All right. Well, let's wrap this up. On behalf of the Arizona Coyotes, the Morello Group of Ownership, all the staff here, our executive team, we just want to thank all of you guys for being on the panel. We'll do a little networking event here as well for additional questions, but let's just give it up for them. Thank you.